Ew. Have you ever tried to watch a wrestling match without commentary? Yeah, I've got a bunch of wrestling that does not have any commentary to it at all over here on the shelf. It's not that fun. Now, like, if you're really into wrestling, you can get through it by just, like, watching a story being told out in the ring. But, like, it's lacking something. It's missing something. You need that voice. You need that person or that group of people to lay down lyrics to the music being played in the ring, man. You really do. With that being said, here's my six pack of my favorite announcers ever, man. Now, look, when I do my six packs, keep in mind, man, for real, like, these are just my favorites. I'm not saying these guys are the best or like whatever event I'm doing or like whatever I put in my six pack. I'm not necessarily saying those are the best. I'm just saying those are my favorites, and it's all subjective, man. So number six, this one's going to get a lot of shit right off rip. Vince McMahon. People give Vince a lot of shit as a commentator with the "Oh my, what a maneuver!" or the just gravelly delivery in every promo he did for like hyping WrestleMania. Vince gets a lot of shit, but that's like one of the voices I grew up on, man. Whenever I think of like some of the bigger moments in WWF history, man, it's Vince with that call. Like all the Saturday Night main events, like all of it was Vince McMahon, for real. I mean, Vince wasn't a great announcer, but it was hit. Like I got hit to Vince like before anybody knew he was the owner. He was just the announcer guy. He was one of the commentators, man. Nobody knew he was the owner. Well, I mean, people in the know did, but I was a kid. I wasn't in the know, and like he always got across the story he was trying to tell or that they was trying to tell. It was his company, so he knew what direction he wanted. He knew what he wanted to bring forward in commentary, man, because it was his company. He knew what story he was trying to tell. So that's what made him kind of good, man. But really, I mean, my love of Vince on commentary, and not Vince the human being, because ooh wee. But Vince on commentary is just part of my childhood. And it's just all part of the nostalgia, man. For real. Number five, Bob Caudle. Man, when I think about Bob Caudle, I smile. Bob Caudle was the voice of Mid Atlantic Championship Wrestling from the 1970s all the way into the early 80s, man. And then he was brought on when Ted Turner took over for WCW and all that. And to listen to Bob Caudle do commentary is like sitting with your grandpa and having him explain wrestling to you. It was like there was just something very calming about the way Bob Caudle called a wrestling match, man. And it was like he was just trying to talk to you like he was your friend. And man, Bob Caudle, one of the best to ever do it. I don't give a shit what anybody says. Go back and watch some old NWA Mid Atlantic shit. Go watch some of the pay per views he called with Jim Ross. I think Jim Ross and Bob Caudle were a hell of a commentary team. They did some Clash of the Champions together. They did some pay per views together. Go look those up, man. You'll get a nice appreciation for the way Bob Caudle called professional wrestling, man. Bob Caudle is truly one of the greats. Yes, Bob Caudle. Um, Number four, we're gonna go Jesse the Body Ventura, man. Dude, you listen to Jesse. Jesse was just entertaining. He was like the first, like, Piper was kind of the first heel commentator in Mid Atlantic, man. For real, I got to give Piper his props on that. But Jesse's the one that took that shit mainstream. He was a heel. He was like the first big time heel commentator. That no matter what they did, he always sided with the bad guys, man. And Jesse was funny. Jesse got it, man. He did. Like you go like the way he would fuck with McMahon about him wearing a hairpiece and a toupee, and just him and Gorilla Monsoon calling all those first few WrestleManias. Like they called him all the way. It was like the first 6 WrestleManias was Jesse and Gorilla. And we'll get more to, believe me, we're getting to Gorilla Monsoon. But Jesse was just cool. He was, man. He was the body. Jesse was awesome, man. He was. Like, no matter what, he would always side with, like, okay, look, check this out. WrestleMania 5. This whole lead up to it, he kept calling Hulk Hogan Lust Hogan, saying Hulk Hogan had a lust for Miss Elizabeth. That's why the Macho Man turned on him. Comes probably true, for real. But yeah, Jesse's run wasn't as long as it should have been, man, because he had a falling out with Vince and went to WCW. And him and Jim Ross just didn't click. And Jim Ross would be the first one to admit that was his fault, because he was jealous of the money Jesse was making compared to what he was making. And Jim Ross will admit that, man. And Jesse's run in WCW wasn't that good. I've enjoyed seeing him come back on the last few Saturday night main events, man. And you can tell he doesn't keep up with the product anymore. That's kind of obvious. But he keeps up with the story of the match that he's calling. You know, he'll go back and watch shit. And it's just that voice, man. Just hearing that voice on TV again in a professional wrestling setting, dude, it flashes me back when I was like 11, 12 years old, and I fucking love it, man. Love Jesse the Body Ventura on commentary. Jesse's my number 4, man. Number 3, Gorilla Monsoon. If we're going to talk about Jesse, we got to talk about Gorilla. That's another one that's going to be kind of controversial. A lot of people thought Gorilla sucked. I love Gorilla Monsoon, for real. But when he's talking to, when he's trying to get a point across, or Jesse Ventura or Bobby Heenan would say something, would you be serious? I'll have you taken out of here. I mean, Gorilla was the shit, man. He was. He would make up names of body parts that you just knew damn well weren't even names of body parts. I mean, and he's the only person to get away with it, man. Gorilla had to have the right partner, though. For real. If you put Gorilla with somebody that he didn't have any chemistry with, man, it wasn't going to be, it wasn't that good. But you put Gorilla with Jesse or Bobby Heenan, man, it was gold every fucking time. Love me some fucking Gorilla Monsoon, man. Gorilla Monsoon was awesome. Number 2. Number 2 on my list, which is number 1 on a lot of people's list. But when I give my number 1, you guys will understand. For real, you really will. Number 2 on my list is Jim Ross. Man, I first heard Jim Ross around the time I first started becoming a wrestling fan, back in like mid-'87. And like, there was something different than what, like, I enjoyed everybody else. Like, I enjoyed listening to Gorilla Monsoon on WWF. I enjoyed Vince McMahon. I enjoyed Jesse. I enjoyed Tony Schiavone on WCW. But then when Jim Ross came along, man, there was just something, the way Jim Ross called a wrestling match. The professionalism that he had. Like, there were 2 different Jim Rosses. You had Jim Ross in WCW, and then you had Jim Ross in WWF. Good old JR. Jim Ross in WCW was a different kind of beast, man. He called professional wrestling like it was a legit sport. Like, he would name off wrestlers' other athletic accolades, man. Like, he would always bring up what college they went to, if they played football, what position they played, what their 40 time was. Like, he knew how to tell a story. Like, he could just, like, you could have 2 basic guys in the ring wrestling, and Jim Ross would get a story out of that, man. He's just like, like, my love for the first one, I mean, yeah, which I'll reveal here in a second, but man, Jim Ross probably the best to ever do it, man. Some people say Gordon Solie. Gordon Solie is a little bit before my time. You know, I went back and I've listened to some Gordon Solie, call some matches on some stuff I went back and watched. And yeah, Gordon was good. Gordon was good for his time. But man, Jim Ross is just on a whole nother level. Jim Ross not only is the greatest professional wrestling commentator of all time, but man, in my humble opinion, Jim Ross is one of the greatest commentators of sports ever, man. For real. If you only know Jim Ross from good old JR during, like, Monday Night Raw in the late 90s and through the 2000s, you are doing yourself a great, great, great disservice, man. You need to go back and watch some stuff from like the late 80s, WCW, and just listen to Jim Ross call a wrestling match. My God, man, just incredible. Jim Ross, my number 2. My number 1 favorite commentator ever, man. Bobby the Brain Heenan. How can you not love Bobby the Brain Heenan? If Bobby the Brain Heenan was not in professional wrestling, he probably would have been one of the greatest comedic actors to ever fucking live. For real. Just, man, Bobby Heenan would say the most ridiculous shit and just make you laugh. And, man, he was not like a good technical announcer. He was a color commentator. It wasn't his responsibility to like call moves and all that shit. His job was to sit there and be entertaining. And nobody ever did that, and nobody will probably ever do that again to the level that Bobby the Brain Heenan did it, man. For real. Bobby the Brain Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon on Primetime Wrestling on Monday nights before there was a Monday Night Raw is some of the funniest shit you will ever see in your life. It was like a modern day Laurel and Hardy, I shit you not. They were great on Primetime Wrestling. For real. And then Bobby Heenan in WCW, even though he didn't give a fuck about the product. Dude, when Bobby Heenan got to WCW, he checked it in, dude. And he was still better than anybody else they had, man, for real. Bobby the Brain Heenan, my number 1 favorite commentator of all time, man. Yo, let me know who's your 6-pack of commentators. Who do you like? Maybe some Rod Trungar from the AWA. Maybe some Bill Mercer from World Class. There's been tons of them. Those are just my favorite 6. Let me know who your favorite 6 are in the comments. Hit that like button, man. Give me a subscribe. And I'll catch you guys on the flip, man. Have a great night.